Salutations, Scarab Gaming viewers. Hope you are ready to tackle the terrifying two-headed hydra that is retail WoW and its communism-like game design. Today, we are going to compare retail to communism and then observe how the artificial restrictions to power differences in retail reduce the game's fun factor, especially in comparison to Classic. I'd like to thank everybody that's subscribed so far.
Thank you. You love me. You really love me.
And if you haven't, and you are enjoying this video or the series, please click that subscribe button for updates on my uploads and give me a thumbs up. Now, let's get this ball rolling. First, let's have a brief discussion about communism and what it entails. Communism, in its purest sense, is an economic system in which the public, or the people, are in ownership of all of the means of production. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels co-wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848 after studying the French Revolution of 1789, a revolution that took place amid a starving and desperate population of French farmers and citizens as 2 decades of poor economic policy and bad harvests finally boiled over into a full-scale, violent revolution that ultimately reshaped France and the Western world forever. Marx and Engels saw this revolution as a necessary and natural revolt against capitalism and the wealthy, powerful elite that capitalistic economies naturally produced over time. It is important to note that Marx and Engels saw socialism as a sort of tentative middle ground between capitalism and communism, whereby the public owns the means of production, but still divvies it out based upon contribution. This allows those more indispensable members of society to be rewarded with more, but also allows legislators to place a cap on that reward in order to produce a landscape of general equality among the citizens. Let's be clear. Communism and socialism are not inherently evil economic models. That is not what I am arguing in this video. This video is about how Blizzard, in 2005, published an MMO in vanilla World of Warcraft that was far less curated and involved limited interference from the player base in terms of design decisions. Blizzard originally created a tough world that required players to form their own private social networks and communities in order to genuinely thrive. And they did this based on their own ideals of what a great MMO experience should be. Later in their development cycle, they began to sacrifice their personal vision as their design decisions were more and more made to appease the majority of the players and their complaints. We can observe that in a way, the intellectual goods that in combination comprise World of Warcraft went from being owned solely by Blizzard or privately owned to being owned more and more by the players or publicly owned, representing a sort of shift from a capitalistic development cycle into a more communistic or socialistic development cycle. Blizzard believes, as many socialist and communist countries believe, that creating a game in conjunction with the apparent wishes of the masses and giving the masses partial ownership of the game's future would create a better product, just as communists and socialists believe giving the public more power over the means of production creates a better society. However, this was not the case, and as Blizzard has continued to appease the player base, their game has lost more and more subscribers. Communist regimes in the USSR, Maoist China, and North Korea have seen similar results, and as the people overthrew their capitalist regimes, they then replaced them with totalitarian echo chambers who built their power under the guise of championing the public, while violently oppressing those dissenters who recognize the guise for what it is. Brax tried to squash dissent at BlizzCon 2018 when the hooded champion revealed himself, claiming the ever-famous, "You think you do, but you don't," when asked about the possibility of Classic or other expansion-based servers. Blizzard is as out of touch with its player base as China or North Korea is with its people, yet many are still strong supporters of Blizzard, just as many citizens of China and North Korea still support their state regimes. The Blizzard fanboys and brainwashed citizens of a communist state aren't as dissimilar as they may initially appear. Blizzard frequently appeases its fans with fan service releases and constant recycling and upscaling of decades-old IP, just as communist states appease their people with the constant reminder that their best interests are at the heart of their legislative decisions. In reality, both entities are simply playing a part that retains their power with the least friction possible. Something that I noticed about communist societies is that they seem to oppose play and therefore fun for the sake of efficiency. China just recently imposed a gaming curfew on all of its citizens under the age of 18. A quote from the BBC reads, "They will also be restricted to 90 minutes of gaming on weekdays and 3 hours on weekends and holidays." I know many of my fellow Classic players are shaking their heads as they hear this. 3 hours? That's barely enough time for my guild to clear BWL. Interestingly, China has essentially restricted the types of games that its youth can play by imposing this ruling. Imagine trying to find a group and run BRD in 90 minutes. Such a limited amount of time would necessarily impose the frustration involved with deadlines on the player, therefore forcing them to choose a game with faster and more streamlined gameplay loops. Succeeding in WoW Classic, a game that requires a substantial time investment for its substantial reward payouts, is literally opposed to the fundamental beliefs of Communist China. By restricting the duration of these youngsters' play sessions, you essentially impose on them a reduced capacity to play certain types of games with longer payoff models. You, in essence, are controlling the gaming experiences that they have and ensuring they play games with shorter gameplay loops and therefore less delayed gratification. Actually, you'll notice that socialism and communism also tend to be averse to delayed gratification, attempting to immediately gratify the people by appeasing their needs, which can many times stifle their drive and intellectual creativity. This, many believe, is why the Chinese struggle with generating new and economically prosperous intellectual property. Blizzard has in a sense gone from a company that creates a free, open market of play like that seen in Classic, to a company that creates guided play. BFA and WoD, the last retail expansion that I personally played, guide the player's goals and gameplay decisions in intentional ways and give the player illusions of power to appease their need for a power fantasy and the immediate gratification of said fantasy. WoW, since the introduction of Dungeon Finder, has slowly become a hub world game with guided objectives, much like how a communist state always has clear, state-guided objectives for its people to follow. In a capitalist state, especially in a laissez-faire capitalist state like that of Classic, citizens, or in this case players, are forced to create their own place in the market, or in Classic's case, their own objectives, fun, and wealth. Retail attempts to force players into predetermined activities via an overly apparent reward system. Classic lets players uncover their own fun and gives out far less to the players who don't seriously invest in understanding the game's systems. Blizzard gives out a lot more power to its casual players in retail than it does its Classic players. Blizzard's decision to appease its lowest common denominator has slowly eroded the top end of the power hierarchies of retail, while simultaneously raising the bottom end by giving the least skilled and dedicated players easy options for achieving a semblance of power and skill. What this does, just like you can observe in certain socialist countries, is erode the top-end players' desire to put all they have into the game, as well as simultaneously prevent lower-end players from actually experiencing the thrills, joys, ups, and downs of improving and climbing a social and economic hierarchy. By squashing both ends of the hierarchical spectrum, you leave far more players in a sort of middling no man's land, where neither top-end or low-end players see much room for growth or reward, which we know to be a key component of a game's fun factor from earlier videos. In our next video, we're going to wrap things up and try to solidify all of these separate ideas into a coherent conclusion. I hope you all enjoyed these ramblings so far, and that it made some semblance of sense to you all. Please drop a comment below if you want to talk further. I respond to them all if I can. Also, drop me a like and hit the subscription button so you can be notified about the next video that I upload. Thanks again to those who have subscribed already, and until the next one, take care, comrades.